How far can you go if you are desperate? Or if you are faced with a life-threatening issue, what kind of hard step are you ready to take to solve such a situation? In this video, I will talk about a certain king, who was attacked by allied forces from 3 great nations that threatened to annihilate his whole kingdom. You can say he was faced with the whole of NATO forces, where he was outnumbered and overpowered. And to make the matter worse, he was running very low in weapons. This story is derived from 2 Kings 3 verses 26 to 27 of the Bible, where the king of the nation of Edom that was attacked by some enemies decided to offer up his son, who was the heir to his kingdom, as a sacrifice to his God. And interestingly, it worked. The war just ended there. I will give you a little backstory to this event, and also talk about the reason this sacrifice worked for him. First, you will have to understand who the people of Moab were, and their relationship with their attackers. The Moabites were the children of Moab, one of the sons Lot had with his daughters after his wife was turned to a pillar of salt in Sodom and Gomorrah. The king of Moab at that time was King Mesha, while his attackers were the king of Isreal, Jehoram, and the king of Judah, Jehoshaphat. These were the descendants of Jacob. They were supported by the king of Edom, the descendant of Esau, who was a neighbor to the king of Moab. So if you check well, you will see that they are all relatives. The father of Moab, Lot, was a nephew to the grandfather of Isreal, Judah, and Edom. Notwithstanding the relationships, I am more interested in the decision that king of Moab took to avert the imminent destruction of his kingdom, which has something to do with the kind of god he worships. The name of his god was Chemosh, a Semitic god that is related to another god Shamash and goddess Ashta. He is believed to be the fallen angel Chemosh, even though in the mythological stories of the angels, it is believed that angel Belphegor was often connected to the deity Chemosh. Whichever way you look at him, you will understand that he is a form of a dark spirit controlling the life of the Moabites. Hence, the resort to human sacrifice to appease and get him to do something can be understood. Chemosh is the national god, protector of the nation of Moab. He is worshipped and reverenced just the way the Israelites worship the Almighty God, they call Yahweh. The Ammonites, who were the brothers of Moabites, also worshipped Chemosh in the same manner. It seems to me that their parents living in Sodom and Gomorrah has something to do with their choice of accepting and worshipping Chemosh. Chemosh was a god of war. He is skillful in the act of war plan and execution. The reason he advised the king of Moab to go against 3 mighty kings of that time was his belief in his ability to win wars, even if the odds are against him. He is a god that tries to classify himself with the God of the Israelites, Yahweh, who is the Almighty God. He tries to influence his people to his own way against their desire to worship the Almighty God. It is interesting to note that the Israelites also worshipped the god Chemosh, especially during the time of King Solomon. When King Solomon married a wife from Moab, he built an altar to the Chemosh god outside Jerusalem in honor of his wife and her people. The proximity of the temple of Chemosh to Jerusalem aided the spread of the worship of Chemosh in Israel. It became a common practice for the Israelites to worship both Yahweh, Chemosh, and even Molech at that time. Though the prophets of that time stood against the practice in Israel, the worship lasted for more than 400 years. Now, all these things happened before the war that led to the sacrifice of the son of the king of Moab. Just before the war with the Israelites, Chemosh was angry with his people the Moabites, even as he permitted them to be feudal holders of lands for the Israelites for the time after which he expected the Moabite to fully settle in their own territory and worship him unhindered. However, due to constant attacks and attempt by the Israelites to drive them away from their lands, he commanded the king of Moab, Mesha, to fight against Israel and establish Moab's independence from the state of Israel. You see, King Mesha was one of the Moabites' king that really took the worship of the Chemosh god to the extreme. He built a great temple for Chemosh in the Moab city and dedicated high places for sacrifice to the god Chemosh. He He engraved on the stones around the temple all the successful battles that the god Chemosh has made for the nation of Moab, especially that of the king Ahab and Omri of Isreal over the years. King Mesha uses the Chemosh altar to boast about the power of the god Chemosh, and how he was able to lead them in successful wars against other mighty nations, where they won the battles. King Mesha believes that the time the Moabite were under the rule of Israelites during the time of King Ahab and Omri was due to the fact they abandoned him their god, Chemosh. And he decided to punish them with such a slavery. Now that they have decided to dedicate their lives and nation to the god Chemosh, their god will protect them against any form of invasion and ensure that they win every battle that they were involved in. With many words, King Mesha boasted about his ability to stand against the allied forces if they decided to attack, and he was sure of his victory against them, because his god, the god of this nation Moab, is back with him, and will be supporting him to win the battle. Now, on the issue of human sacrifice to the god Chemosh, I would like you to understand that Chemosh was a general deity of the same nature as Baal. He tries to equate himself with the Almighty God, the reason he demands sacrifice as a sign of reverence by those that worship him. Sacrifice shows a commitment to the god that is offered to, and Chemosh is a god that is interested in exercising his powers over the people that worships him. The sacrifices usually offered to Chemosh includes bulls, sheep and other animals demanded from time to time. But in some extreme situations, Chemosh will demand human sacrifice to show how serious the request is from such a person offering it. In human sacrifice, the relationship of the person being sacrificed to the person sacrificing such a person is important to the god. If you can remember, when God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, it was a difficult request to Abraham. You know, Abraham had his promised son at around 100 years, and there seems to be no other child coming for him. God decided to go the extreme, testing him to offer up the same son as a sacrifice for him. This will give us a clear understanding of the significance of human sacrifice. Human sacrifice is not just getting any human to sacrifice, it is getting someone that is so close to you, someone you love so much, and offer such a person to the God you are worshipping. If you understand that even God himself did same thing to the world. John 3 verse 16 talks about God loving the world so much that he decided to send his son to die for the world. This means God sacrificed his son to save the world. When he offered up Jesus Christ to die for the sins of the world. This will give you a clear picture of what human sacrifice stands for. It is giving up the best person in a person's life for the cause. Now, since we have established who the god Chemosh was, and who the king of Moab was, I think it is about time we talked about the real thing that happened during the sacrifice of the son of the king of Moab. So it happens that attack was coming to Moab. The Israelites and Judah troops were advancing towards the Moabites, and the only escape route for them was through Edom. As the king of Moab took 700 swordsmen to break through Edom and create an escape for his people, he met a brick wall. The Edomites overpowered him. He had to return back to Moab and wait for the Israelite to come and get him. At that time, he was pressed against the wall with no place to run to and nowhere to hide. As the time was racing and the enemies kept advancing by the minute, there were no more options for him again. He needed to do something fast. It was time to call on his God. And to get the attention of God, you must come with a kind of sacrifice. So which kind of sacrifice can you offer at that time? You can decide to offer 1,000 bulls like Solomon when he was dedicating the temple. But there was no time to gather 1,000 bulls. He needs to do something big and urgent too. The desperation of the imminent death and destruction that is coming on them is evident before all of them by each second. There were cries all over the city, even the king's guards and soldiers were confused. There was no place to run to, the whole city is encircled with enemy troops. It is time to take the extreme decision. The king looked at his son that was standing in the front of him commanding the battle with him. He grabbed his son by the neck and took him and laid him on altar of Chemosh. His heart was pounding fast. What he must do now does not require thinking or discussion. He has to do it fast. He has to it without contemplating the consequences. He took his sword and slaughtered his son on the altar of Chemosh in that minute. And suddenly the whole nation was quiet, not more cries of south again. The king has done what no man has ever done. He took the body of his son and hanged on the wall of the city for all his enemies to see. When the whole camp of Israel, Judah and Edom saw that the king has hanged his own son, the heir to the kingdom, on the wall as sacrifice, they all went quiet. They suddenly felt heaviness of heart, and were all confused on the reason they were even attacking Moab, their relative. They all abandoned the war and went home. So, my take is this: the war ended because Israelites understood the principle of sacrifice, because they have experience of human sacrifice too. And they abandoned the war because their heart was heavy for the decision the king of Moab took. Thank you for your support.